Right. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021. Before we get started with our slides of what to look for this year, I'm going to go through just a couple housekeeping slides, getting us started. Of course, your blue hyperlinks, when you look at this on your computer as a PDF afterwards, you should be able to click on any of those hyperlinks and go check out any of the pages from our website. We have been running a winter special on our evolutionary astrology course, and we decided to end it yesterday before we kind of figured out, oh yeah, we have a 2021 forecast. So for those of you who are on or listening to this forecast afterwards, if you would like to join us as an associate studying evolutionary astrology, you've got, as Leroy said, till the end of the week to do it. And what we've been in process of this winter is combining our segment 2 and what used to be segment 3, health and wellness astrology. We've been combining them together. So as you can see, we've got the basics with segment 1 and we've got everything else with segment 2. And we're still in process of putting together various PDFs in segment 2. And I have a few classes that I plan to teach this winter if this exciting year allows me to keep myself on schedule. So starting off, the first thing that I want to just remind everybody of is the collective numerological cycle that we have. Eastern, the Far East, China uses a different yearly cycle than us. I know there are a couple of others out there, but there are a lot of people in the world who've kind of come on to these numbers that we would this year call 2021. You add them up and it's a 5-year. So take a moment and just reflect that we initiated seed thoughts in 2017 with a 1-year. We germinated them in 18, they started to gain momentum in 19, and we spent last year, 2020, in a 4-year, testing everything we've been building up to this point. For me, I was one of those female people on the streets in my pink pussy hat in the beginning of 17. Remember that? There's one way of looking at it. You can also look at it from other various groups or cultures as well. What we get to in a 5-year is it's the halfway point of a 9-year cycle. And when it gets to this apex of halfway through, this is the full bloom. This is the blossoming. This is the creative manifestations from everything we've made an effort with over the last 4 years. So just think about that as a foundation for yourself this year. What are you wanting to manifest? What are you wanting to create in your world this year? Now, keywords: freedom, adventure, change, curious, adaptable, social, fun-loving. A few distortions: unreliable, fickle, aimless, easily distracted, attention-seeking. So you can play with those for yourself over this next year. But again, the biggest intent to remember is creative manifestation. So what are we going to create individually and collectively this year? Before we look forward, though, I want to take just a moment and show you the dates and degrees of those 5 conjunctions we had in 2020 between Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. From the beginning of the year to the end of the year, you can see them on your screen. I've put in the cycles that we are looking at: a 12-year cycle with Jupiter, Pluto, 20 with Jupiter, Saturn, and 33 to 37 with Saturn, Pluto. And what I want to point out for you is that we didn't just have these conjunctions in 2020 and then, yahoo, yippee, we get to leave that behind. We started 3 new cycles. And these cycles are going to be going forward with us into 21 and 22. So I was one of them. Leroy and I lost 3 family members in the second half of last year, all 3 unexpectedly. Only one was COVID. And we've been right there with everybody going, okay, I can't get ready. I can't wait to get rid of this year. Well, I'm here to just say we don't want to leave it behind entirely. We don't want to forget it. We have to take what we learned last year and start to carry it forward into greater awareness on a soul level, into maturing and being responsible on a soul level, and then choosing to decide how we want to participate as a social being in the world. So we'll touch upon these themes of these planetary transits over the next couple of hours with these PowerPoint slides. Point again is, what are we starting? What was initiated last year that with these 3 planets we want to germinate this year? We want to start to move forward with this year. I always like to draw up the ingress chart for January 1st of every year at midnight. And being a United States citizen, I use Washington, D.C. Any international listeners, thank you for my perspective from the U.S. And while we have a couple of trines in the chart, we also have a fair amount of squares that are taking place in this ingress chart. Probably the one that many of us has noticed is the fact that Neptune has been an orb of squaring the nodal axis of the moon for about the last 6 months. It actually has the exact square January 26th when Neptune is at 1906 Pisces, North Node 1906 Gemini, South Node 1906 Sag. So with Neptune square the nodes, wherever we are on planet Earth, there can be some confusion about what is a truth for us versus what is a lie. And of course, what if we differ with our spouse or our friends or family members around truth versus lies? So these themes are going to carry all through the year, not just because the nodes are in Gemini Sag all through 21, but also this flavor of the ingress chart. Keywords that I put down is we have to watch even through 21 tendencies with escapism or neglecting our responsibilities. We have to watch out for addictions, and not just physical ones like we commonly think of, but emotional, mental, spiritual addictions as well. We can be addicted to Netflix. We are at moral choice points in so many ways throughout this year. It requires us to exert a spiritual will on how we will walk our talk with however we best perceive truth in our world. And of course, Neptune has general rulership of the overall immune system, and Gemini Sag rules the breath and have some co-rulership of the respiratory system. So Neptune square the nodes from health and wellness is where our respiratory immunity has been compromised by this little thing called a coronavirus. Think about that as Neptune has been in orbs of this square in the second half of this year, and how it's been building, building, building. Will we get relief after 2026? Neptune will move off of that square within a couple of months. The longevity last year with its retrograde cycle. Maybe we'll see it back off. There are going to be other things in the picture when it comes to the virus. But we also have a Uranus T-square going on. Hold on, I think I'm always trying to find which one. There it is. My little pointer. There we go. We also, which we'll talk a lot about here, are looking at Jupiter and Saturn square Uranus, but the ingress chart brings in the oppositions from the moon to Jupiter, Saturn, and the square to Uranus as well. So we can find emotional upsets throughout this year if we are not willing to be open. So if we get emotionally or mentally entrenched in any of our perspectives, be aware that something might rock your world, shake you up, forcing you to look at something differently. We also will have Sun making a square to Chiron, last quarter square. I'll speak to Chiron through these slides as well as how I also perceive it relating to the virus COVID-19 and just how much it has destroyed our reality. And for some people, their entire worlds and businesses or finances and abilities to take care of their family, put food on the table. That square will carry through the rest of this year as well. And of course, Mars is making, just finishing up actually, it's a third post-shadow passage from its retrograde cycle this fall, and it is spending January and February making those first quarter squares to Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto one more time. The third first quarter squares really is that potential to break free from whatever we feel conditioned or controlled by the patriarchy, and wherever we may be suppressing our desire to move forward, to be free, to do something differently than we have before. I'll show you in the next slide just how much energy there is in January to break free. The last thing that I want to point out, though, is Venus conjunct the South Node, the ego of the past in the Ingress chart. Is it possible that we might learn to value truth, universal truth, or moving in that direction throughout 2021? Stay tuned. Just the fact that we have these squares tells us that there is tension. There is still tension on planet Earth in all kinds of various ways in how we look at our world and our belief systems and our government and the effects of this virus. Here we are in 2021 January, though. I had this in last year's forecast, and I show this to you to help you see that the inner planets, Mercury, Sun, Venus, are also going to move through Capricorn and Aquarius here for the next 6 weeks and create conjunctions one more time. They did them in early 2020. Here they are doing them one more time to Pluto in Capricorn, but to Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. This can be some of those personal initiations of sparking new directions for us, not just because it's January 1st and it's a brand new calendar year. It's because these planets just happen to be meeting the stellium one more time. And they've had a year of going around the circle, meeting that stellium with squares and trines and oppositions. This is kind of like a aha point that just kind of all comes together for these three inner planets. And all of us on an individual basis will have new directions that we want to move forward with. Some of us may be part of social activism in various ways, and there may be groups that we personally feel inclined to be active with. Pay attention to what sparks for you over this next month and a half with these conjunctions. And remember, whether personally or collectively, it is sustained effort that will bring us the results that we are intending and desiring. So here's what so many of us have been talking about or looking forward to with the Jupiter conjunction to Saturn a few weeks ago on the winter solstice. It took place at 0.5 degrees Aquarius. Yes, it is that theme, the rebellions begin. Now, Jupiter and Saturn are a 20-year cycle. They govern societal expansions and contractions. So they're kind of the, shall I say, rule makers in regards to our laws, rules, functions, norms, customs, opinions, taboos. It is the philosophical beliefs and principles of Jupiter that are legalized into laws with Saturn. And so this has a tendency then to create those famous standards of conduct, right, wrong, and being judged if we violate them. And it also creates pressure to conform to those consensus rules and norms so we can get along as groups of people. And sometimes it's a good idea. It really is healthy to pay attention and obey stop signs. However, sometimes the consensus wants to conform us in ways that are at the expense of our own individuality. And this is what we're really going to be going back and forth with in 21. And so as you can see here, Jupiter is going to spend a year in Aquarius, 21. Saturn is going to spend 2 years, 21, 22. They're going to be setting the stage for Pluto's ingress into Aquarius, 23, 24. So it's not just this year that we're looking at Aquarian rebellions or breakthroughs or innovations. This is just the seed thoughts. This is just those beginnings that are going to take off through this year. And Saturn's going to work to stabilize them next year in 22 or break them down even more if necessary. And then get ready for Pluto coming in 2023. Pluto, by the way, if you are interested, Pluto will have 2 retrograde cycles, 23, 24, going into Aquarius, back to Capricorn. So it's going to have 5 hits between Aquarius and Capricorn with 2 retrograde cycles. Tell me that's not going to create a lot of disruption between defending yesterday and moving forward into tomorrow. And as you can see here, Aquarius transits always bring the pressure to break down any crystallized standards of conduct and pressures to conform. It's not guaranteed. We could look at these planets in Aquarius and see more elitism between haves and have-nots. We could see more class warfare between the colors of your skin, the racial discriminations. We can see it in all kinds of various ways. We can see it just between adults and the elderly or adults and children. But what it is intending to do is evolve our social support systems, especially as, for instance, healthcare systems are exposed in their inadequacies. It's for evolving our governments, all those social contracts that we do with Jupiter and Saturn. And it's also, what is the role of government? What is its function with its citizens? There are natural roles for a government to do. The federal government can much easier roll out vaccines if it's your choice to have one or take one, compared to a hodgepodge of regional communities or states or provinces. Now, astrologers have been talking quite a bit about the fact that this conjunction starts 20-year cycles in the element of air between Jupiter and Saturn for the next 200 years. We are finishing up 200 years of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in Earth signs. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. Reflect back on the materialism of the last 200 years. It boggles the mind if you go back that far. Now, going forward with these conjunctions in Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, how can we even fathom what will happen in the next 20-year cycle, let alone the next 200 years? Leroy and I just recently watched the George Clooney movie, The Midnight Sky, one evening over the holidays, and I actually had trouble sleeping after that movie. I was half awake all night long because I'm such a nature lover, and I'm like, holy moly, I don't think I could imagine being locked in a spaceship going through space because there's no more Earth left. Oh boy, that one affected me. So you get the point of what I'm trying to say here. Now, I'll give you the dates and degrees here at the end, but it just so happens that the Mercury retrogrades are all taking place in the element of Earth this year. Mercury's going to be retrograde in Aquarius the end of the month, then Gemini, and then Libra. So we can look at 2021 almost as being a little itty bitty snapshot with Mercury retrograde in air as to what maybe some of the themes are that we will work through over the next 20 years with Jupiter Saturn in air. Maybe even a few visions or insights of what we are looking at the next 1 to 200 years. Now, here's the biggest archetype about Aquarius, and evolutionary astrology looks at the sign, the house, and its planetary ruler as the same archetype. This is the archetype, Aquarius, of the individuated unconsciousness or our unconscious mind on an individual level. And our individuated consciousness contains 3 parts: the past in all its detail, current and past lives, access through spontaneous memories, it's surfacing into consciousness naturally, re-imprinting events, and of course we have various alternative therapies to access it. It contains everything in the present that we don't want to look at, what Saturn wants to suppress. This is where we go for avoidance. These words are kind of like distortions of Saturn. Avoidance, settling for less, not making an effort, depression. It also, though, contains the blueprint of the future, where our own soul will pop up into our consciousness, spontaneous future-orientated messages. And the more they happen, again, that is showing us where our own soul is intending us to evolve. Now, the quest, when you have longer, slower, the outer planets, taking more time to move through the sign of Aquarius or your 11th house on a personal level, we have to make sense of all of it, past, present, and future, all at the same time. It can be confusing. It can trigger us. And what does it trigger us with? The archetype of trauma. Trauma, the whole shock and awe thing. This relates to Aquarius. And trauma is an intense disturbance caused by a shocking event or stress that has a lasting effect. And it can be spiritual, mental, emotional, or physical. My 87-year-old father accidentally fell down a flight of stairs a month and a half ago. It was a shocking event. And all of a sudden, my 82-year-old mother and my 2 younger sisters and I and bless Leroy, he came with. We were at the hospital. And so it's been a lot of conversation, and I have been working to be as observant as possible with my mother. They had 64 years together, but she figured she'd have to put him into a nursing home. And Dad's soul, his higher psyche, chose a different way. Not everybody can recognize that, and it doesn't mean it's any less traumatic. But there's an intense example for you. Leroy lost a brother to COVID. So it's important that, remember, the archetype of Aquarius is fixed air. That means fixed mentality. It can mean circular thinking. And that's what we kind of have to be careful with as we go through this year, the next 2 years, the next 19 years with Pluto in Aquarius. So much will happen over the next 2 decades with regards to how we look at trauma. If we are not willing to process trauma and we suppress it, it will create subconscious behavioral reactions. And even the most aware of us and the best of us can still fracture, can still get upset. Going to tell this, Leroy. So yesterday evening, I like to prep on my lazy boy where I can relax and write and think. And I'm in the living room, and Leroy's going up and down the stairs with our studio making DVDs for our court sales. And he trips on the last step at the top of the stairs, creates this loud noise, crash, bang all over. I hear him. I throw my computer, go running around the corner, and it was just like all of a sudden my situation with my father was in my head all over again. And I'm like, no, 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 don't you dare do this to me. He's okay. But you see that point? We can think that we've processed through something, and boom, we can be right back in it. And that can happen again and again and again for us throughout the course of this year and the next few years. Every time it happens, you really, really want to stop, pay attention. What's being triggered in me? What does this mean? How do I heal? How do I understand this? How do I look at this? How do I process through this? How do I calm down and take the deepest breaths I possibly can so that I'm not just pushing it back down? Needless to say, my work for the evening was over, and I spent most of the rest of the night kind of getting up and walking around and just making my body move, walking to breathe in the house. And there's a new house rule. You do not go up and down those stairs without the railing. And of course, we made that house rule a month ago. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. 85 to 90% of us are born with this from past life trauma. And then when you look at the majority of us who don't even acknowledge reincarnation, can you see how we can go along just projecting that trauma forward again, 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 again? Now look at the traumatic effects that we're going to have with COVID-19. Personally, collectively, I have a dear friend who is an ER nurse in a major city of the United States. And we've this client who turned into a friend who turned into a client who's a friend, all back and forth, back and forth. We've had many conversations this year, just working through the intensity of what she sees day in, day out, and her anger at family members who say there's, no need to wear a mask. There's no need to be careful. There's blah, blah, blah. Persistent effort must be made throughout this year to change the effects of any trauma. If you have past life memories come up, this is going to be an excellent time period for alternative and traditional therapies. If you re-imprint something, however it's happening for you, you want to work through it, even if it is as simple as conversing about it with a loved one or a friend. The point is no suppression. No suppression. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. All right. You probably have a few questions about this little virus running around. Another Aquarius archetype is the word contagion. And if you look it up in the dictionary from a psychological perspective, it is the spread of a behavioral pattern or attitude or emotion from person to person or group to group through suggestion, propaganda, rumor, or imitation. Oh my God, do we got any psychological contagions going on the planet? Refusal to wear a mask to suppress the transmission of this virus. Contesting the legitimate results of our recent US presidential election. We also have contagion as a physical disease, and this is the communication of the disease from one person to another by close contact or the exchange of fluids. And it's not limited to viruses. It can also be through bacteria, fungi, and prions. Prions are incomplete proteins that accumulate in our tissues and organs that the body does not know how to process. Now, of course, coronaviruses are very much included in contagion diseases. Coronavirus is just a common mutating virus that affects our respiratory system. So, in regards to COVID-19, the United States has 4.5% of the world's population, and we are running just a little over, well, over under, but we've been averaging 20% of the world's COVID-19 deaths for the last year. Now you tell me what's wrong with that math there. Best healthcare system in the world? Nope. Maybe for some, but not for all of us. So with the inadequacies, and by the way, I'm not going to remember the statistics, but somewhere healthcare budgets on state and local levels have decreased somewhere around 15 to 20% in the last decade. So not taking into consideration population increase, not taking into consideration inflation and the increasing costs of healthcare, we've cut the budgets in this country. So is it any wonder that COVID-19 is causing individual and collective traumas? The Royce brothers' wife refuses to admit or allow the family to talk about him dying of complications from COVID-19, even though it is on the death certificate. There will be lots of long-term side effects, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, for all of us post-COVID-19. And we will study the physical and mental side effects of this for years. We'll be writing about it, PTSD through Pluto in Aquarius. But we also perhaps have the potential to change these healthcare systems and how various governments respond to communicable diseases, maybe being more networking with each other in that regard. Not guaranteed though. We also have the whole issue that the long-term benefits and side effects to vaccines are yet unknown. And if you've been paying any attention to the news, there's a mutation of the coronavirus that was first found in the UK. Doesn't mean it started there. It's found in the US now. Now they're saying there's another variation coming out of Africa. And the thing about the UK and perhaps the Africa mutations is that they spread faster. They're more transmissible, which means people catch it easier, which means as we're trying to flatten the curve, these mutations may have another say with all these planets in Aquarius. And will these mutations render vaccines less effective? What about all our fears? Well, I'm just going to wait and see. And of course, we don't know the timeline of immunity to any of these vaccines. The rush to get them out in a year, most trials went 3 months. So if immunity lasted 3 months, they considered it to be effective. You know how we have mutations of the influenza, which is virus, and they have to try and guess the new flu vaccine every winter. We may have this with this new coronavirus that we commonly call COVID-19. We don't know. This is what is going to be worked through as we have these planets in Aquarius. So I don't mean to disappoint you, but I don't see things changing real fast. Social distancing may be the new norm for the near future. Near future, at least the first half of 21, quite possibly all of 21, and it may be 2022 before we might be looking at establishing a new normal. Jupiter expands everything good and bad. So Jupiter in Aquarius, contagion, mutations of the virus, you can expect more of them. And we just don't know what will happen. We are going to have to observe Aquarius word. But we also, through Jupiter and Aquarius, will see the expansion of new vaccines. With every month and year that goes by, science and technology, Aquarius will be able to create more and more efficient vaccines. And sooner or later, over the next year or two, there will be one or a few that will emerge to be effective, quite possibly with all the variations. But right now, it is actually wash your hands, wear your mask, and do your social distancing. Saturn in Aquarius again. It's going to be new normals. We won't totally go back to everything being the same again. For the first time on the planet, globally, we have recognized how fast a disease can spread. We had it happen 100 years ago with what we call the Spanish flu in 1918. By the way, the only reason they call it Spanish, it originated out of China as well, but Spain was the only country that did not censor the news. So the news on the Spanish flu came out of Spain. That's why they called it that. But the potential is there for our governments to start working together, not suppressing the news and not refusing to work with each other. But you know how, wherever one or more is gathered, the energy is greater. We're going to learn that we'll survive better together just through these contagions. Stay tuned. Pluto and Aquarius will really bring it about. And because we have so much global mobility in the world now, we can expect more of this, mutations of diseases, more with Pluto and Aquarius. It just is going to be part of the picture until we learn how to network together. Now, I really think that we're looking at Pluto and Aquarius before we will have what's called mass herd immunity. And that means when 70 to 90% of the people are either vaccinated or have been exposed to and lived through the COVID virus. This is going to happen at different rates in different countries. We're seeing it all over the place. We're seeing how Sweden went for mass herd immunity, and it didn't quite work. You know, at one point after South Dakota had the Sturgis motorcycle rally, it's a town of 7,000. Our state is 850,000. We had 450,000 bikers here for 10 days from 60% of the counties in the United States. And up until that point, we were so low with the virus. And then all of a sudden, September hit, October, November, December, we had some of the highest deaths per population capita in the world in our state, November and December. We'll see how it goes in January. We'll see whether or not there's a holiday spread. I'm not going to debate politics of our government, but I am of the opinion that you need to wear a mask, wash your hands, and social distance. And we kind of got it the hard way in our state over the last couple of months. And by the way, as you see on the bottom of your screen, it's Pluto that is the ruler of viruses, bacteria, fungi, and prions. Now, my next slide is a housekeeping slide. It's my other work. I'm not trying to promote, but neither am I going to hide and suppress or deny and pretend that I'm not part of a leading edge technology that makes the virus no big deal. This is my other work that I've been involved with for 20 years. I actually found this work months within the last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in May 2002. And so this is work that I've done over the last 20 years. Basically, there's a technology out there, computerized technology that can take your photograph and it can impart 500,000 healing frequencies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Last winter, 2019-20, we added 16 frequencies to the mutations of the influenza imbalance. To date, we have 11 variations of the coronavirus frequency, the coronavirus imbalance. We call them imbalances and frequencies. We're on the leading edge of this. We add new frequencies weekly, and we're continually checking. And November was the month that we found the most recent variation energetically to the coronavirus imbalance. Best thing, if you're interested, is the book Sanctuary. It is written as a spiritual novel instead of dry quantum physics, but everything in it is true. Just a little side note for you, for those of you who may be interested. Some of you may know that I found evolutionary astrology in 1985. Typewriters and cassette tapes. It was, and the way I was exposed to it was my first astrology reading with an astrologer was Jeffrey Green. Just picked him out of the blue because he was lecturing on the planet Pluto, which rules Scorpio, and I have Sun in Scorpio. Jeffrey Green has Sun conjunct the South Node in Sagittarius. I forget which house it's in right now, first or second. When a planet is conjunct the South Node, one of the possibilities is what we call fruition. So much prior effort that something comes through and just blossoms. And look what he received in dreams through the field of evolutionary astrology. Well, when I discovered energetic balancing, the creator of this technology, Stephen Lewis, he has Sun conjunct the South Node. He has it in Gemini. I forget the house. I think it's third house. Third house. Yes, I think it's the same house as the sign. And he brought through a beam me up Scotty technology. While I am careful and we wear masks, Leroy and I were exposed to COVID. We acquired it. I was asymptomatic. Leroy had symptoms. I had few symptoms. We came through it, picking up on the frequencies we needed within a week or two, never lost sense of smell or taste, and no side effects. No side effects. We have family members not on AIM who are still dealing with side effects 3 months after acquiring the virus, and some intense side effects. So again, if it's of interest to you, you know what to do. Enough of that. I share it because these planets in Aquarius are telling us that we're going to make technological leaps forward. And we don't have to wait years for a vaccine. We can have tomorrow's, quantum physics available to, evolve us forward. Leroy gave blood. He had the antibodies, and so he was able to give plasma. I was asymptomatic. I didn't have enough antibodies. I didn't have enough plasma. They weren't interested in me. So I'm being careful because I don't want to catch another strain of it, even though it might be no big deal for me. I don't want to go down that road. I'm still going to be a little careful. So here's the big aspect everybody is looking at this year. It happens just once with Jupiter, last quarter square Uranus, so I included it in here. But it's the Saturn last quarter squares to Uranus that we're all looking at. And in general, a last quarter square is a crisis in consciousness or a crisis in what to believe. Now, Saturn is the individuated consciousness. Uranus is the individuated unconsciousness. So this planetary pair is where our conscious mind and our unconscious mind interface with each other and relate. Saturn doesn't want to look at it, wants to throw it down below the surface into the unconscious. Uranus wants us to break free and throws it back up in our face to deal with it. And so here's the dates on your screen. Here's the degrees that you can look at. These are going to be some of the highlights for the year: February, June, and December. And of course, as we are looking at this crisis in consciousness, it is going to bring up the debates between what evolutionary astrology calls inclusive versus exclusive laws, policies, social support systems. Inclusive, giving, sharing, and including. Exclusive, taking, hoarding, and excluding. So these last quarter squares are going to show us where we have scarce social support systems in need of reform. Again, look at it in regards to the United States, and we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare compared to the average of the rest of the world, the average of other countries. And we still have 20% of the deaths from COVID, with 4.5% of the population. That is a need for reform. It may take a while. We may not see it happen in 21. It may pick up some steam with Saturn in 2022, especially if this virus mutates even more and vaccines are not effective as fast as we want. And it may really take off when Pluto gets into Aquarius. Now, let's look at another little point here. The last time we had Saturn conjunct Uranus was back in the late 80s. Maybe some of you remember being around that time period. There were 3 conjunctions in late Sagittarius. So Saturn-Uranus is not only the interface between our individuated conscious and unconsciousness, and now how that revolves on a deep soul level. It's also a 45-year cycle of evolving society and government. Society, think Saturn in Capricorn. Governments, think Saturn in Capricorn. Jupiter-Saturn brings its own innovations and ideas, but so does Saturn and Uranus. So where Saturn as a slower moving planet can contain Jupiter and hold that pressure for consensus conformity, Saturn cannot do that to Uranus. Uranus has the last word. It is the outer, longer cycle. So Uranus will throw it up into the air and bring it down in a whole new smithereen when it needs to. Now, what can have a tendency to happen with Saturn and Uranus is the innovations happen faster, Uranus last word, than the laws can govern. Saturn catch up. These conjunctions happened on what's called the galactic center. It's the center of our Milky Way galaxy, where our little solar system is out on the edge of one of those arms and just a minuscule nothing. But however, whenever we look to those late degrees of Sag, at this point in humanity, there can be deep insights into truth or understanding what we call those natural universal laws and principles. There can be deep insights at this point into what is sustainability on planet Earth. That phrase, climate change. If you think about that in the late 1980s, there's always various planetary configurations that can be involved in any one theme. But there was a lot of exposure of natural law with these conjunctions, and it's been the intent of them moving forward over these next 45 years. And as we've went through the decades of the 90s and the 2000s, and now as we are going to go through the 2020s. By the way, the next Saturn Uranus conjunctions are going to think 2032, and they're going to be late degrees Gemini, the opposite of this conjunction. Stay tuned. We'll see how that turns out as time goes by. And Kitty woke up. You're going to get off my lap. All right, we'll see if that does the trick. And so this Saturn-Uranus cycle that we're in, where we are going to experience these last quarter squares, because of the initial conjunction, that theme of truth versus lies is still going to be very much part of the picture. It was the seed thought, and it's going to be in all areas of life. Just look what Saturn and Uranus have done since this last conjunction in regards to technology with mass communications. During the midst of this last cycle, we all got computers, and we all know what the internet is now. Most of us, very few people, are not on the internet anymore, in the westernized world at least. And look at the cell phone that came through. I want to say Leroy was down, it was post-college. Yeah, you were post-college. Can you remember when you got your first cell phone, Leroy, and you were a little hotshot driving around with this big old clunky box in your vehicle? Remember you telling stories about that?
Yeah, I
Was
got
that
a
the,
new company car, oil field service sales. Okay, so our job was to go down to the crew changes, helicopter pads, and talk to the company men coming in off the rigs to sell them our brand of services slash oil field tools. So yeah, we had to have a cell phone, and it was one of those ones that like in the console, right in between the front seats of your car.
yeah,
It
yeah.
weighed about 5 pounds and rarely worked because back then you had to have the roaming function, right? Because when you left your
No cell
local
phone.
area, it wasn't a cell phone. It was, so and then when you finally needed to use it, you had to make a long distance call from Corpus Christi back to Lafayette. You got called out on your expense account because everything was so expensive. So it was, but yeah,
Well,
21. I think I was 21, so that would be about 45 years ago.
point
40.
is, yeah. Point is, um, cell phones were coming along, but that back in the late 80s into the early 90s, after this last conjunction, they exploded and expanded. And now look at everything that's evolved in just this one cycle. So now we're to that last quarter square between them, and it's a crisis over regulating everything in regards to social media on our phones and how it controls us. Before I just have a few more words on their last quarter squares, I just want to point out also that the last time Uranus was in Taurus was 1934 to 1942. World War II started in 1939. And of course, the 1930s. It started before Uranus in Taurus. It started Uranus in Aries, but Uranus went into Taurus. And Roy and I were raised in the Northern Plains, and I grew up with parents who were alive during the dirty 30s, the Great Depression, and, a penny earned. But we also had President Roosevelt. I think he was the second Roosevelt, Franklin. We had his New Deal, where he really came forth and um, instigated a lot of social support systems, as I call them generally, and had all of the efforts to put the unemployed to work in building our infrastructure. Will we do that again with Uranus and Taurus? Stay tuned. Was also a time period for a lot of banking and financing regulations that were reformed coming off of the stock market crash of 1929. So these last quarter squares then are going to relate to crises in many collective societal areas. The whole climate change thing will bring about land conservation. How do we go about farming? Are we going to, continue to farm as wastefully as we have in the last decades? What about food supplies? What about nutritious food? You can expect all of those areas that kind of put them in with climate change. But, Taurus is food, clothing, and shelter. And Uranus in Aquarius, the haves and the have-nots, who can afford to have the food delivered by all those delivery services that are out there now. And, the amount of adults and children and elderly that are food insecure has been rising all over the world with COVID. Who will do something about it? Which governments and societies will make efforts to change it in those areas? How are you learning to be a better, to work with better conservation in regards to not wasting food? Can't remember, the United States wastes something, oh God, I can't remember the amount. Let's just say United States wastes something like 25 to 40% of its food. It's a ridiculous amount. that may change. What can you do individually on a conscious level? And of course, I think we'll still look at more earth events and climate change innovations. In other words, building structures are going to evolve and change so that they withstand forest fires, or they better withstand earthquakes, or they take less resources. One of the things that's happened with all the tariffs of the last couple of years is the price of lumber has increased 30%. So building a house, you can add on 30% from what it cost you just a couple of years ago. We will also see the whole issue of money, including the cryptocurrencies and the banking and the regulations coming forth again. Much of this will be stemmed from the wealth inequalities that we have currently going on pretty much all over the world. I will have my favorite slide on that in just a moment. Social media, expect it to be in the news and expect it to be coming up for regulation. Excuse me, what is it? 49 attorneys general in the United States, 49 out of 50 attorneys general last month sued Facebook for monopolizing um, and basically suppressing or destroying any competition. Stay tuned. We'll see how that unfolds in the news. But we will also, quite possibly with these last quarter squares, see an increased fracturing of our news sources. Aquarius, the psychological contagions. An example is Fox News not being conservative enough, and so other news outlets coming forward that are even further to the right. America One Network, I think, or I can't remember the names of them. You can Google and find that out. There will be those types of issues and up for discussion of what do we do? Do we all have that Uranian freedom to believe whatever we want or get our news from wherever we want it? Will there be some type of crisis that there has to be some consensus agreement that this is a fact? That's a lie? Stay tuned. We'll be working our way through it this year in the midst of just trying to keep up with all the technological revolutions. Uranus Aquarius in the 11th house rules technology in general. And we'll see explosions of it with Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius. We'll see the big debates over how much of it we want in our life with these Saturn Uranus squares. Leroy and I do not have an Alexa in our world, and we don't plan to have an Alexa in our world. And it's a little interesting to go over to various family members and blown away by the gadgets. Can't even imagine the gadgets. Leroy had a niece give her dad a portable electric snow shovel. It runs itself, no effort needed. I mean, you got to steer it, but you don't have to put any of that push. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Anyway, you get the point of what I'm saying. The technological revolutions are just going to blow us away. One of the areas we might see this, because in Aquarius, the element of air, and it also ruling what we call the atmosphere, the air that we, all breathe. It then will relate to space travel. So with these last quarter squares, will we see airline travel or accidents in the news some way? I think you'll really see everything busting out between, what's his name, Elon Musk and SpaceX versus Richard Branson and his Virgin Atlantic. There's like a half a dozen. Even Jeff Bezos is getting into building spaceships and space flights. He's the owner of Amazon. So we can see all types of revolutions in those areas, or flights taking off here and there and to the moon again, and of course back and forth with the space shuttle. We might also possibly see an accident or two as well. That's just one area where we can see everything going. I have a couple of slides that I like to show. So thank you for those of you who are familiar with these slides and allowing me to explain this. I want to just touch base on two areas. We talked about with Uranus and Taurus how money, banking, financing, and I'm not a real big fan of the cryptocurrencies. Um, they can easily be abused as well as used. And if you look at, for instance, like Bitcoin, it is extremely wasteful energy wise. We're better off with, just conventional accounting, computing, and using our uh, dollars and rubles and whatever your currency is. But I've been an advocate of public banking here all the way through Pluto and Capricorn. And I can, Ellen Brown's my heroine. I highly, highly recommend the book in the lower right, Banking on the People. She goes through all the different types of currencies. She goes through all the different possibilities of what we can do. And public banking, like the state of North Dakota has done for 100 years, is by far the simplest and easiest. A government that owns its own bank can keep the interest and invest it locally, resulting in potential savings of 35 to 40%. It's getting to the point where interest on infrastructure is half the cost. In other words, it's about making banking and credit a public utility to sustain the economy rather than mining it for private gain. And it also allows banks to become safe again, using the post office, postal banks like Japan does, most successful in the world. Point is, profits generated from private bank credit end up in private coffers, CEOs and shareholders. Profits generated from public bank credit are returned to the public, the taxpayer, citizens, elderly, infrastructure. By the way, North Dakota has 7 times more banks per capita than any other state. And when they did those stimulus packages in the US the beginning of last year, what was it, the 2 trillion or something like that, and they had the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. North Dakota got more money per person, per capita, than any other state in the country. Each citizen in North Dakota, they got the equivalent of 5,000 with the companies in North Dakota because they had so many small banks, community banks, that partner with the Bank of North Dakota, which acts like a mini Federal Reserve. You can go to publicbankinginstitute.org to find more information. As we look at the devastation of COVID-19 on the budgets of states and cities, and we can look at this across the world. This extrapolates worldwide. This is not limited to the US. As we look at the devastation to their budgets, and we look at the extreme costs to the hospitals that some are not surviving. They haven't been surviving for a while. We've had so many rural closures. This grassroots effort of public banking, a city creating its own bank, keeping its assets in-house, Wall Street, not Main Street, interest returning back to itself. Cities and states, the grassroots is going to come. And I'm on record as saying the time will come when this movement will go the way of cannabis. Stay tuned. Anyway, more information. Park your money in community banks if you want. There isn't a bank in the United States that won't guarantee or insure more than 250,000. You have to create multiple accounts if you got lots of money. But if you park it in your community banks or your credit unions, it's much, much safer. The other area, I've used this one before too. Here's our quantum physics and artificial intelligence, or AI. Aquarian ingresses and the planets transiting through there bring leaps of growth in technology and even leaps of growth in our mental awareness. Just look at how much we are aware of as a society versus a decade ago or versus, 50 years ago. We have leaps of growth, and it will speed up, or it will feel like it's speeding up this year with Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Now, here's what you have to understand in regards to conventional versus quantum computing. You can see it on the screen here. Conventional is a calculator. It's binary. It stores and computes 1 or 0 with transistors or switches in the computer. And the integrated circuit transistors are as small as the laws of physics, meaning normal physics can make them. Our little cell phone now carries what our first computer once used to. But now that cell phone is going to make more leaps into quantum, where we learn to compute with atoms and subatomic particles, and we can store multiple values at the same time, 1, 0, both of them, anything in between. And it allows quantum mechanics, allows computers to work parallel instead of serial, work at the same time instead of one by one. This is the same as the awareness that light can be the particle and wave at the same time. Depends on how you're looking at it. Expect more articles on this to come out over the next year with both Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius to help us understand it. Expect the Saturn squares to Uranus to bring up all the ethics of artificial intelligence and whether or not we are going to start putting chips in ourselves to prove we've been vaccinated, or a chip to have our bank account and we pay for something. Those chips are going to go from a device as a cell phone to being inside our body. Welcome to the Aquarian age. It will come whether you want it to or not. It is just going to happen. And right now, with my energetic balancing, while we carefully safeguard the computers so that the FDA can't come in and take them away from us, we'll get to the point where we'll have our own handheld little device that just will go over any part of our body and tell us what's going on. Our little Apple phones and Fitbits are starting to do that. Those devices are then going to go inside our body. I hope not right away, but it's coming in the next 20 years and faster than you think. So, how do you work with that? And I do want to say, in regards to the polarity of Aquarius Leo and the pair, one of their distortions is social inequality and elitism. We think of Leo as royalty, we think of Aquarius as, that avant-garde is the upper elite, whether we're talking liberal or conservative. It's the social classes of haves and have-nots. And so there is this distortion of the elites with resources doing those exclusionary tactics, hoarding, not sharing, not paying their fair share in taxes, for instance. So if social inequalities continue to increase, there will be corresponding massive uprisings to redistribute the resources and change governmental institutions. And the degree of these rebellions can relate to the degrees that Capricorn authority power grabs have taken over. And so we can see monopolies become subject to antitrust breakups. They've been increasing since the Uranus-Neptune conjunctions in Capricorn. They've been increasing through Pluto in Capricorn. Aquarius comes along to break up social inequalities to create social equality. And of course, the unity and diversity, which is what many of us call the theme of the Aquarian age. And by the way, these planetary transits through Aquarius, even Pluto in Aquarius, they are not the dates of moving into the Aquarian age. No one knows. And when you have 2,000-year cycles, 2160 to be exact, you can have several 100-year transitions. Are we leaving the Piscean age and moving into the Aquarian age? Yes, we are. But the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was not the dawning of the Aquarian age. And these transits are not. Are they helping with the seed thoughts? You betcha. But just recognize that this whole shift is longer and broader than we think it will be. All right, I'll see if I can try to speed up now with the rest of my slides. But before that, I just want you to have a few key words for moving forward this year. These first 4 words are entirely Aquarian. It's about detachment from the immediacy of something. It's about then being able to observe it and find objectivity. And then it's about the ability to individuate and then innovate. So if you take nothing forward with you tonight other than these 4 words, these are your mantras for 21. Detachment, objectivity, individuate, and innovate. And as we've said with Aquarius and EA, it takes courage to be a group of one and liberate into our unique individual soul nature. And the degrees to which we do that is then the degree to which we will really attract in those like-minded souls that we call friends and have, true, deep, honest friendships through these Aquarian transits. And we're doing it because we are authentic to ourselves, Jupiter and Aquarius, which then allows us to be authentic in the world. So I want to now just take a moment here to remind you briefly that we have Pluto in Capricorn for 2 more years, 2021, 22. It's a 15-year cycle when Pluto moves through Capricorn. It's very elliptic. It goes from 10 to 32 years in individual signs. And so Pluto in Capricorn is in the trenches. It senses the change with Jupiter and Saturn, And it's like, oh my gosh, I need my security. So we have both autocratic and democratic governments around the world experiencing conservative or exclusive actions, the power grabs, the breaking and destroying of laws, the ethnic and gender judgments and discriminations, the immigration and asylum retreats, the financial supremacies, the gutting of environmental laws, the starting of wars. Example, Donald Trump's complete disregard for the rule of law in all 4 years of his presidency, and the current attempts of the Republican Party, especially these last few weeks, to overturn the 2020 US presidential election. So remember this, it will still be going on in the background as a base note, and it's going to be a push-pull between tomorrow and yesterday. And that old Aquarian energy where we want to break free and move forward, avant-garde, where we want to defend yesterday and the past for security, and how it turns out will depend upon all those souls in the middle who are kind of ambivalent and sway back and forth with however the news of the moment reaches them. So we're not done with Pluto in Capricorn, and it's going to do its last grasp. So Saturn is new phase Capricorn, but one more time, remember, their conjunction was in Capricorn, so it has that flavor. So we still will have old structures we have to break down as reality comes forth. And it will still concern family, career, resources. It'll now, include health. But it's here to start bringing in new perspectives to evolving our life in the material world. And Saturn new phase Pluto is teaching us to become more and more objective with our circumstances and how we want to go about changing things. And wealth and social inequalities can only last so long before the cataclysmic evolutions, one way or another, create redistributions. That will also be one of the long-term effects of the virus crisis and any of the other Earth events or even a country's constitutional crisis that may come up. Jupiter is new phase Pluto, and it's actually going to have waxing semi-sextiles to Pluto, but its conjunctions in 20 were a Capricorn flavor as well. So how are we evolving our perception, Jupiter, of reality, career, general, familial roles, social roles, addressing the mortality of what's happened with the virus? How are we understanding our life personally in a more objective level? And how are we starting to then broaden that out on those collective levels? Remember, Jupiter expands things, both positive and negative. It's no guarantee. It's how many show up. I'm going to start going through my slides faster. I forgot to bring my clock in, and I'm looking, trying to see. Oh boy. All right, I'm going to hurry. I used the Gemini rising chart, but everything except the moon will be here except in the Sibley Sag rising chart as well. Putting the ingress chart on the United States. January 1st always finds Sun opposing the US Sun, and it always finds the inner planets opposing the US 4 Cancer planets sometime during the year. The United States has a history of dividing on inclusive versus exclusive issues. This is the red line, the Mercury Pluto opposition, okay? It's also natally the Saturn Sun squares, and it is the Neptune Uranus squares as well. All three of those aspects create that split between the United States. And throughout history, we have waves of being inclusive. Lady Liberty, give me you're tired, you're weak, and exclusive, closing the border. And we will find that these things will be going back and forth pretty intensely in our country throughout this decade, because we have 3 more Pluto oppositions to that natal Mercury. There are 5 of them. You can see these dates, and you look at this one right here, January 9th. You see any of that going on in our political circles right now? Yes, we do. And then this is the backdrop too. Next year, when transiting Pluto, will have the 3 conjunctions to the natal US Pluto for the first time. Our collective soul, death, and rebirth, and how we're going to move forward. So throughout 2021, there can still be more breaking down, specifically in the United States, just because of these Pluto transits to the natal Pluto Mercury opposition. It's not the only thing going on, though. Where we will start to see some of those consensus shifts. And I want to just point out that when Saturn goes direct, October of 21, it will be within minutes of, no, that's not correct. I think that's supposed to be 38. I'll correct that in the PowerPoint slides for you. That's where it goes direct, and the US South node is less than that. The year later, Saturn goes stationary direct, 18.5 Aquarius, just ahead of the US moon. So both of the next 2 years, the Saturn turns stationary direct. Expect those time periods to be a little more significant in the United States. If you use the Sibley chart, this Saturn cycle, I think, might have Saturn over the US moon 3 times. Moon rules the public. Are we going to move towards objectivity and move forward socially, or will we defend the past? Now, what I want to point out for you next, I'm repeating this chart in here so that you can see it visually. We've all been looking at the 3 planets here, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, making oppositions to the Cancer planets. And what we also need to look at, though, is the cycle of Neptune in Pisces by transit, getting ready to have oppositions to the natal US Neptune, and Neptune getting ready to make last quarter squares to the natal Mars. And as you can see, we just had the nodal axis on the US July 4th natal Mars chart. Leroy, I'm going to need you to come get a little boy. He is just getting a little, wants his Taurian holding. Here's the Neptune dates for you. Neptune's going to make 5 of those last quarter squares to Mars, and it's going to make 3 oppositions to its natal position this year. This is going to intensify the crises in consciousness and beliefs that we have been looking at with Saturn and Uranus, and it will intensify this for us as a country. How do we take action as a nation based upon the evolution of our collective psyche? Are we going to further divide politically with our ideologies? Or are we going to find some way to come together in inclusiveness again? Historically, whenever various outer planets have activated the United States Mars Neptune square, it's brought about stock market collapses and financial upsets. Will that happen again? Time will see. We'll find out. I think mixed in with the Saturn Uranus squares in general, it's quite possible that there might be some financial and monetary rebellions to redistribute in some way. And it can be, as simple as more progressive laws supporting our, social systems. Who knows? There's a variety of ways in which this can come through. But take some time to ponder these aspects for yourself if you live in the United States or not, because these Neptune transits are just as deep and potent as the Pluto transits that we saw going on. I also then want to point out for you the fact that US is heading towards a Chiron return here in a few years. But what will be going on for us, we're just getting off of Chiron having a last quarter square to Venus, to Jupiter, some of the financial upsets we've went through with the virus, some of the familial death and dying and devastation we've went through with the virus. We are now getting ready for Chiron to make last quarter squares to the US Sun and make oppositions to Uranus. And so to me, these Chiron aspects will have a lot to say over the next couple of years in regards to how we go forward with universal health care in the United States. Worldwide, it can have there probably isn't a country in the world that isn't reviewing its healthcare in some manner or form. In the United States, will it bring about enough of us saying, this is ridiculous? 4.5% of the population, 20% of the death. Come on, we can do better than this. And this might also be part of the picture of the catalyst in moving this forward. Could it be something as simple as, for those who don't know this internationally, in the United States, we have what we call Medicare, where it's universal health coverage once you become 65. Will we lower that to 60 or 55, as some of the progressive presidential candidates wanted to do last year? Stay tuned. This also portends for us to perhaps have continuing fallout with the devastation from the COVID-19 virus, which again may only increase the demand that we do something else. I'm going to remind you of this one more time. If you live here in the United States, how do you detach, objectify, and then how do you want to act going forward, individually and collectively? Now, I am going to show you a few slides now with Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Their charts are both just so extremely active. I'm looking forward to the day when I no longer really bring out Donald Trump's chart. But if you look in red, Neptune is spending 2019 to 22 squaring all of his Gemini Sag stellium. He just had a nodal axis return. Transiting Pluto is getting ready to oppose his natal Venus, and transiting Uranus is making a last quarter square to his natal Pluto. We also have Saturn opposing Pluto 3 times in 21, Jupiter opposing Uranus 3 times in 21, as well as going over his descendant opposing ascendant. 5 outer planets, that's a lot going on. Quickly, here are the dates of how Neptune last quarter square Uranus, squaring the nodes 5 times last year, this year, squaring the moon 3 times, and this year, next year, squaring the sun 5 times. I am not a fan of Donald Trump. This is my filter. But I think there's going to be a slow, relentless recognition that he is not emotional stable and he has no moral compass. And he will use increasingly outrageous words and actions Pray for peace for 2 weeks, and he may potentially have a very hard crash with reality, because Neptune is all the fantasies. And he is the epitome of what has driven those collective and political splits with our country, specifically the exclusive ones. And there are those that thinks anything he says is gospel. If you paid any attention to the news in the last 24 to 48 hours, it's been the opposite. And so there can be some crumbling fantasies for this person. And there can be some hard reality checks. And Saturn in Aquarius can force some shocks upon his soul as it makes these oppositions to Pluto. And not only that, these Uranus last quarter squares to Pluto, they can be causing extreme frustration for him over any perception he may have of losing his control and power, losing the White House. This also, the impulsiveness and spontaneity of Uranus, can lead to impulsive actions and words. And as Uranus is transiting Uranus is in his ninth house, he can believe he is above the law. Pluto's oppositions to Venus, as they come along this year, we won't be done with the emotional outbursts even when he's left office. It's going to be, it might not be pretty for him over this year. He's not going to be happy going off into the sunset riding his golf cart, because there's too many financial situations on the horizon from his previous actions that can create some pretty tough circumstances. And basically, what Pluto opposing his Venus is asking him to do is to emotionally grow up. May or may not happen, but you'll have these dates and degrees that you can observe this in his chart for yourself and see how things go forward. Point is there's some pretty heavy aspects in Donald Trump's chart. He might start fading from the news, but not very fast, and not if he can get away with it. I just want to quickly point out that we have the North Node in Gemini and the South Node in Sag all through 2021. We will not have a nodal axis change until a little over a year from now. So we will continue throughout this year to have an emotional review, nodal axis, of truth versus lies, facts versus opinions. The intent is for our personal truth to keep expanding into universal timeless truth, and then accepting unity and diversity. There's many paths home. We are not guaranteed this. The opposing groups of ideology may continue to increase even more. My God's better than your God. My truth's better than yours. Yours is a lie. And of course, we can look at all the misinformation campaigns with social media, corporate news and media. Eclipses will take place. I'll show you those coming up here. The eclipses will bring about the intensities of when these distortions are exposed, but also the opportunities for the truth to come out. And of course, as you know, with Gemini Sag, you can see all the various themes on your screen that we have been working with in the the last 8 months of 2020 as we've went through this nodal axis transit. Now, I bring you the reminder of this because the nodes in Gemini Sag means that's where the eclipses will be taking place for us. But I also, just in my observations, decided that I was going to put all the eclipses on Joe Biden's chart as he goes through this next year. All four of these eclipses will be strong in his chart. The North Node eclipses are going to occur in May and June, and they are going to be active on his natal Saturn. See the transiting North Node on his Saturn at 10 degrees Gemini almost, and the opposition with that. You can see how close this lunar eclipse is going to be on that with his natal Uranus in Gemini. But take a moment here. I'm going to point out a few transits. We have transiting Pluto opposing his natal Jupiter 3 times. He has a history of family tragedies and being able to, it's the words that Donald Trump can't express empathy. Joe Biden sometimes has more empathy than okay, let's move on. And so what will go on with this? Stay tuned. We'll be observing this one as time goes by. Mars will be in Cancer during the North Node eclipses and also going over this Jupiter. We will have Neptune making nice trines to Mercury. Maybe there can be some communications coming in. We will have Saturn. Hold on. I'm like, hold on, where's my Saturn? Where's that? There it is. Yeah. We will have Saturn opposing his natal Pluto, just like Donald Trump. Joe being an 8th house Pluto, I sometimes wonder if the Pluto and Saturn oppositions to these planets in the 8th house might be some financial upsets that we will experience as a country, especially if the effects of COVID continue shutting down various businesses and we are not supportive of states and cities with their red budgets. Uranus is going to be opposing his natal Mars. And Mars Uranus aspects can bring accidents and upsets. Maybe they're financial in Taurus and Scorpio. Maybe they're ideological. We can all observe this as time goes by. And then, of course, Jupiter is going to dip into Pisces and retrograde back into Aquarius, and it will make 3 passages over this south node. There can be some perhaps communication issues of being able to really bring things across. He wants to bring the 2 parties together. Will there be networking in that way, or will the Republicans be doing everything they can to make him a one-term president? I put down here all 4 eclipses active in his chart. Accident, health issues, assassination attempts. Those have historically occurred recently in history on Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. Battles with Congress, probably the most typical one. Financial and earth event upsets. That can also be the Uranus-Mars thing, because traditionally a country's leader can be a substitute chart for a country's chart. It can be another chart that you look at into observing things. Needless to say, it's going to be active. Here briefly, oops, let me go back. Here briefly is the North Node solar eclipse. North Node eclipses are about emotionally moving forward. They are about activating, the North Node. And here we'll have the Pluto oppositions to Jupiter, the trines going on. We'll have all of those still the same going on. Perhaps not as many aspects, but the basic 5 with the outer planets are still in play. Let me move you into the South Node eclipse season. We are going to have a South Node lunar eclipse on Joe Biden's solar return. And you can see right here that the sun is going to be minutes from his natal sun and the moon opposing that. The nodal axis is finishing up in Gemini and its north node sitting on Uranus, south node opposing it, and then transiting nodes are going to be squaring his natal nodes. In other words, more of the same, more of what we just spoke about in the first eclipse slide. To me, the writings that you see here are just some of the themes. There may be more that come through. South node eclipses that are going to come in November, they are always trying to have us go back and address the past, hopefully to heal it. You know, it maybe it's possible for Joe Biden that Jupiter over his nodes 3 times may bring about some healings for him. Will he be exposed to the virus in some way? Time will tell. We'll have to find out. Jupiter's going to go into Pisces, I think May 13th of this year. And so we won't be out of the woods yet in regards to enough of us having a vaccine, although he has had one. How long will the immunity last? Will there be side effects? Who knows? Will there be some financial upsets with all these Scorpio planets on this lunar eclipse that's going to come on his solar return? The solar eclipse then comes in early December. And of course, Mars has moved into Scorpio. Let me back up. Probably didn't talk about this. He's having a Mars return on his solar return, and they're both being opposed by transiting Uranus in Taurus. Again, I looked at those and I went, oh, accidents? You know, stay tuned. We'll find out. And then we have Mars moving through the rest of those Scorpio planets to the solar return that is on his natal Mercury and his sun. You know, it gets hard to forecast what's going to be happening a year from now. We can see trends. You can see what these aspects are. You can work with observing them for yourself as you go through 2021. Now I have just a few more slides and we're done. Jupiter makes waning sesquisquadrates to Chiron. This is where it moves into balsamic phase. And to me, Jupiter in Aquarius, Uranus the healer, I think there's going to be a reemergence of the role of quantum physics in healing. Being able to heal with some type of laser technology, being able to recognize on another level, you know, the mind-body connection. That energy flows where attention goes. Attention goes to fear. Well, you can maybe manifest that. And I think that there can be intuiting of new modalities. And of course, the whole thing of new healing technologies. And so you'll want to, over this next year, just kind of pay attention to what actions do you need to change for your own healing? Here again, how can you heal the trauma in your life? And if you have any traumatic circumstances or events, how can you use them to move forward? And can we work with greater objectivity around ourselves, especially in regards to health issues? And of course, I think that these transits will have an effect on us health-wise, collectively. I told you Mercury is going to be in the element of air in all 3 of its retrogrades. It is going to be in air 200 days, 6.7 months of the year, over half the year in air. So communications and mental capacities are going to be on overload in 21. You want to continually make that effort to be as objective as you can. Think things through. Think things through to logical consequences. Aquarian energy overload this year is going to want to go into the circular thinking. You utilize those Mercury retrogrades to think things through. Consider a different perspective. We will also have a Venus retrograde the end of the year. Here's the dates going into January, end of January 22. And it is entirely in Capricorn. Venus will make 3 conjunctions to transiting Pluto in Capricorn. It'll make other aspects during this retrograde cycle, but this is a significant one. We're going to get to the end of this year and we're going to review the last 2 years. We're going to review Pluto in Capricorn since 2008. And it's really going to ask us what we value as individuals and as a country. So what is most important to you? Again, we'll wait to see what circumstances are as you get to the end of this year on an individual basis. You could keep it tucked away in the back of your mind, though, that we are going to have another Venus retrograde coming up real soon. I'm going to sneeze. All right, thank you. But I also want to point out that we're going to get to the end of this year. I keep wanting to say next year. And while Venus is transiting Pluto in the sky, Venus is also going to activate that natal US Pluto at 2735 Capricorn. And the US conjunction, the transiting Pluto conjunction to the US natal Pluto, that first one I think is February of 22. And so Venus is going to get into the act. It's going to be a part of the conversation as we move into transiting Pluto conjunct the US Pluto in 22. Will there be more intense financial situations going on? Quite possibly, in more ways than one. Stay tuned. We'll address those as time goes by and as the Venus retrograde cycle gets closer. Finally, I just want to, oops, I took my thing, so now I've got to do this. Just want to remind you about the Uranus biseptiles to Pluto. There's one more. How many of you were even aware that Uranus was making 7 waxing biseptiles to Pluto? Remember Uranus making 7 waxing squares to Pluto from Aries in 2012 through 2015? Well, it moved on 10, 12 degrees, and we have been in the midst of these biseptiles. We have one more to take place in April of 21. We had one just happen in 2020, tail end, day after Christmas. So we're feeling this quite strongly right now. There's a theme of Pluto in Capricorn wanting to maintain control, but Pluto in Taurus breaking down whatever is unsurvivable. So what is a septile? There's 7 of them. It's dividing the circle at 360 by 7. We have a septile, a biseptile, a triseptile, waxing and waning. Septiles in general, they bring about a sense of special destiny through fated events, and it's what appears fated. So when we get to the biseptile, it's the potential to realign with our evolutionary path individually and collectively, but it's not guaranteed. We can use Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius to suppress the changes we need to make. We can have that circumstance that shows up in our life as a fated event, and we can go with it, or we can try to again suppress it, avoid it, ignore it. So the degree of realigning with our evolutionary path, individually and collectively, will depend upon how we want to work with things individually and how we want to work with things collectively. So let me just back up for a moment. The 6th out of 7, and you can reflect on your life with these dates if you want to. The 6th out of 7 was just a few weeks ago. What was going on in your world helping you align your life? I would pay attention to the end of March and the month of April as well, because it will be one more opportunity to again really align, realign on whatever you perceive your evolutionary path to be. And the clues to this are going to come wherever transiting Pluto and transiting Uranus are in your charts by houses. That would be where you would go look. So one more time, the subtle minor aspect, yet with two slow moving power planets still working collectively in the last couple of years. Your country, your culture, your region has been realigning towards what EA calls natural spiritual laws and principles. Where have we been in denial of them? All right, thank you. So finally, I leave you one more time. Moving forward through 21, detachment, objectivity, individuate, innovate. It takes courage to be a group of one and liberate into our own unique individual soul nature. All right. Early 2020, I did a 2-part webinar on Saturn in Aquarius. It is half price on our website. Oh, I should get the link on there. I'll put the link on there for this. And then
Forecasting webinars page, yeah.
forecasting webinars page. Thank you very much, Leroy. And then in the last few weeks, I did Jupiter in Aquarius. So you're welcome to get more information there. And we have a Mercury retrograde coming up in Aquarius here, the end of the month. So our free pay it forward webinar is going to be January 25th. Look for the email link to come in which you can sign up for it, attend live, or get the link with all the PDF PowerPoint slides after we're done. And thank you, everyone. I managed to go not too bad. Comments, questions, anything, Leroy? Did I forget anything?
Nope. Amazing work though. And what a lot of work it was, right? So that's one response on the board. Yeah. Very well done.
Hey, EA Zoom gave me the accomplishment award because I'm always showing up with my slides.
All right,
I
nice job,
just
Star Lady.
it happens to I don't write books, but boy, I write those PowerPoint slides. And hey, faster reading, okay? All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I wish you all the best through this new year and take care of yourself, be safe, take care of others, and help everyone else be safe as well. All the best. Good night.